Hi everybody, Adrian Fuentes here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
So Andrei, thank you for being with us today, the Democrats Greater Tucson. You're running in the District 1, and there's at least, I think, 6 people running in the primary. So we're really excited that you're here with us today and see if there's ways we can help you in your campaign. And you introduce yourself. You want to build the economy that works for everyone, tackling the climate crisis and making Arizona the solar state, protecting our democracy and freedoms, including a woman's right to choose. These aren't just words of a campaign, they're personal, and they've been the work of his life. The grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors and son of refugees from communism, Andrei grew up in a small upstairs apartment where his family used food stamps and struggled to make ends meet. But because America welcomed immigrants with open arms and invested in Andrei with public schools and Pell Grants, he went from being a kid whose parents didn't speak much English to working in the White House and building a business that created thousands of jobs. Andrei has spent 25 years fighting for people and the planet and making real progress. His public service began while working in the Clinton White House. President Clinton called Andrei a critical part of the team and passed the first balanced budget in 30 years. While helping create millions of new jobs, bringing healthcare to 8 million kids, and expanding college aid for working families. Andrei worked with Al Gore to sound the alarm and call for action on global warming long before the climate crisis. Watching Gore's courageous determination spurred Andrei to commit himself to doing his part and taught him what being a leader should be all about. In 2007, before the financial crisis took the Arizona economy into a tailspin, Andrei saw the need for reform on Wall Street. He joined forces with Elizabeth Warren to launch and push for a consumer watchdog agency to stop mortgage brokers and credit card companies from preying on working families. The forces of reform faced off against the largest army of Wall Street lobbyists ever assembled and won. President Barack Obama signed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau into law. So far, it has provided over $17.5 billion in relief for American consumers. Barack Obama turned to Andrei to write change we can believe in, his policy plan for America Renewal. And Andrei was the founder of Democracy, a Policy Journal. The New York Times said, incubated Team Biden. As the chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, Andrei led the fight against extreme Republicans like Jan Brewer, who eliminated the Children's Health Program and signed the most restrictive abortion law in America. Let's give Andrei a warm welcome from the Democrats of Greater Tucson.
Thank you. I'm going to take you with me everywhere. You deliver my pitch better than I do, so appreciate that.
Well, it's a great pitch. I got to tell you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great to be back. Have spoken in person a number of times to this group and see a bunch of friends on this Zoom. John Schwartz and Pat and Tim and I'm sure others who I'm not even seeing up there right now. But you heard some of my background. I won't belabor it. This is an important race, and it is really one that's going to be critical to controlling the House of Representatives and what happens in the United States of America. You guys have a critical race there in Tucson as well with Kirsten. These are going to be 2 races that decide who controls Congress. And, on top of that, the area that I'm in here in Maricopa County is also, on top of all that, a swing area. This congressional district is one that will also decide what U.S. senator we send to Congress and who controls the White House. This is a district that President Biden won in 2020, but Donald Trump won in 2016. And it's a district that voted for all of our statewide Democrats, 4% or more, people like Mark Kelly and Katie Hobbs and Adrian Fontes and Chris Mays and others. And so it's going to be really important what happens up here, as it is important what happens down with Kirsten Engel in Tucson as well. You know, as you heard, I'm not new to these issues, and I have a 25-year track record of fighting for these issues and making real progress on these fronts. And I think that's important. There are 5 other people running in this primary. And I'll say I like all of them, but I'm also, I think, pretty unique in having that kind of track record of actually having worked on these issues, and that's important. It's important to being able to, one, win this race. This is a district that is somewhat tilting Republican, even with the kinds of outcomes we've had. If you just have a brand X Democrat that nobody really knows next to David Schweikert, David Schweikert's going to win. And we have to be able to have a candidate with real qualifications and experience and credentials that they can bring to bear in that. You know, we've had running a really strong campaign, again, because of the help of people on this meeting here and many others, thousands and thousands of others. We've actually outraised David Schweikert every quarter of this campaign, and done so without any money from corporate PACs. David Schweikert gets 70% of his campaign contributions from corporate PACs without any self-funding. Almost all of the other candidates in the race have funded their own campaigns, hundreds of thousands or in some cases millions of dollars, and we've done that just with people who believe in this campaign and who are excited about this campaign, and that's going to be really important to our race as well. We have really built a great group of supporters and endorsers, everybody from people like Kate Gallego, Mayor of Phoenix, to Jerry Bean Wilner, the Mayor of Paradise Valley, Jenny Dickey, the Mayor of Fountain Hills, people like Kelly Butler and Lauren Kuby, the League of Conservation Voters, Brady PAC against gun violence, one of only 12 people in America that they've endorsed for Congress, Mitzi Epstein, who's the Democratic leader in the state Senate, and Steve Gallardo on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, many, many others who have looked at this field and decided to jump in and support me. And so I think that's important for winning this race. I'll also say, maybe just by way of wrapping some of this up so we can get into more of a discussion. Look, winning the race against David Schweikert is very important, but that's not where the job ends. It's where the job begins. We're hiring somebody to actually do a job, and that job starts once that person is in Congress. And we need somebody who actually has a track record of delivering. The things you heard about before in terms of things like helping to start the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and working with Elizabeth Warren to get that passed through huge opposition back in 2010, having written Barack Obama's campaign policy plan, Change We Can Believe In, having written the Democratic Party platform in 2000, having taken on the Republicans here when I was state Democratic Party chair and working with many of you back at that time. Those are important qualifications to actually be able to move the needle on the things that matter in Congress. And then just the final piece I'd say on that, it also matters that we have somebody with a track record that you can depend on. As some of you will remember, I ran before for Congress 12 years ago and lost by 2,195 votes in the primary, not that I'm counting, to then State Senator Kyrsten Sinema. And, you know, back then we were talking about with a lot of folks that, it matters who we elect in the primary. A lot of people said, oh, as long as as long as one of the Democrats wins, they'll all be fine. And it wasn't fine. And, I was saying back there are important distinctions and a background in having been able to, on my part, get things done versus somebody who even back then was kowtowing to the Republicans in the state legislature and supported by the Republican big money interests and so on. And look, in this field here, again, I like all the folks, but you have a bunch of folks who have either never fought these battles, as opposed to the 25 years that I've done so, or in some cases who have actively for many years fought on the other side. And I think that's important to have somebody with a consistent track record. So I really am grateful for all of you. I have been a Democratic Party activist and out there knocking on doors for decades. I've been a PC for 20 plus years and LD chair and all of that before I was state Democratic Party chair. You all are the backbone and you make this state be what it can be and have gone as we've changed from a bright red state to a purple state and one where at least Democrats have a fighting chance. And that's because of all of that you do day in and day out. So really appreciate everybody's time, and I'll maybe just pause there so we can have more of a conversation here.
Okay, well, you kind of anticipated where we're going next, and that is we're going to have some Q&A. Lee, are you in the queue for a question?
My question is District 1, and I'm glad you said Schweikert, because now I know that I really like you. But you have all these other, what part of your congressional district comes down to Tucson?
Yeah, we don't touch Tucson as much as I love Tucson, and I'm married to a fourth generation Tucsonian.
That's okay.
And,
I just wondered, and I'm glad that Mike put you in the program, because I've been seeing your name for months, and I remember when you ran before for some offices. You even had a nice party for us at the Arizona Inn.
That's right.
And if you care to do that again, I'd be glad to attend.
Well, then we'll do it.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for being here today, because I had started a list of all the people running in District 1, and your name was one of the people, and I was amazed at all the people running. So thank you, Mike, for programming you, and thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Mike, it doesn't look like we have any questions just yet.
No, not in the chat, but I'd be
Looks
happy.
like Tim is raising his hand.
Oh,
Tim.
yeah. Hey, thanks.
Yes. Go for it, Tim.
I hadn't formulated a question, but it's not very often we get someone with Andrei's mind and just knowledge, and I really want to ask you some things. I was recently, I'm reading a book now on nuclear war, and it's scaring the heck out of me. It's by Annie Jacobson, and it's just making it all very real that we're going to have Trump maybe as president, and America is unique that we have this singular authority where the president can do whatever he wants. And that with AI and other weapons things, I just feel like this is a really critical time to have the right people in office. And I don't really have a question. I just want to know what your thoughts are about this time and the stakes that we have in the existential sort of things that are at stake right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and Tim's one of my favorite folks. Somebody who has been, as I talked about, fighting these battles back when we were a bright red state. Tim's been at it, as have I, for a long time.
Thanks,
and also, Kennedy School. So he knows a lot about these things. But look, I think it's a little bit of what I was saying before about you're hiring somebody to do a job. The stakes are high at this moment. Again, this is about defeating David Schweikert, but it's not just about defeating David Schweikert. It's about replacing him, and it's about making sure that we as Arizonans are sending folks to Congress who can really grapple with the challenges we face that are existential. We have an existential threat to our democracy. I'm, as you heard, I'm the grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors. That hits personally to me, and the worry about what happens if Donald Trump were to be reelected. We're facing, as we all know, 2 years ago today, with Roe v. Wade being struck down, threats to our basic freedoms. We're facing the climate crisis, where I've spent many, many years working on meeting that challenge. And then, as Tim was saying, we are also facing a real set of very complicated international threats. And, you know, I, like so many of you, think back to the Cold War and the threat of nuclear annihilation. But the truth is that as scary and legitimately scary as those times were, there was some sort of balance of power. And you had two forces on either side pointing missiles at each other, but they were, at least you had a kind of bipolar world where you understood what was going on. Here you're facing, in this day and age, all of these kinds of threats, whether it's not just Russia or not just China, but countries like Iran, terrorist networks, others with very different kinds of calculations that they're making. And so the international threats we're facing are in some ways even scarier because they're less predictable. And that is going to mean that we really have to be concerned about our national security in the years to come. And I see that being tested right now in Ukraine. I see threats to that coming in Taiwan. As you heard before, I'm a former Navy Reserve intelligence officer and spent 8 years looking at some of these issues while in uniform. And it is a truly scary time where we have some real big forces to grapple with that unfortunately are also reaching into American politics. And we know that Russia and China have been taking steps to affect what happens in American elections. Our intelligence services have been telling them that. And that's not even counting the things we don't know about, or the things where they're reaching into the Republican Party with their propaganda and with some of the elected officials that are there parroting their party lines.
John, you're welcome to state your question.
It's good to see you again, Andrei.
Likewise.
So in your answer there, I noticed you didn't say anything about the economy. Trump leads Biden by 20% on the economy. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I guess what I wanted to ask you, and then maybe comment on it after hearing your answer, is how you are going to deal with the economy, and especially with the issue of the price increases.
Yeah. No, that is great, and obviously John, in his work over the years, has written so extensively on that, and the Center for American Progress and Demos and many other places. Yeah, look, economy is, as it always is, going to be central to this election, and I think we really, as Democrats, need to have a positive economic agenda. And I'm worried somewhat that we're not doing a good enough job on that overall. Yeah, we need to criticize Trump. We need to talk about what's going on. But going back a little bit to what I was saying before about threat to our democracy, Donald Trump is not the cause of the threat to our democracy. He's a symptom. And we wouldn't have the kinds of threat to our democracy if a whole lot of people weren't really giving up on our democracy because they feel it hasn't worked for them. Because for a lot of people, administrations come and go, but for 60% of our population or so on, they haven't really seen a raise in the past 25 years. Wages have been overall flat for them at a time that, as we're seeing right now, the cost of living is going up in so many ways. And so we really need to talk about, what does opportunity look like in the 21st century? How do we have a real response to building a sense of trust that people have? Because when people don't have hope, they become easy marks for an agenda of hate, an agenda that doesn't offer any solutions for them, but says, you know what, your problem is it's those people over there with different color skin, or from a different country, or love different, or whatever else it might be. And that's what we're seeing. And Donald Trump doesn't have any economic answers, but we have to have economic answers. And so there's a few things that we need to talk about. One, as I mentioned, talking about climate change, we're ground zero here in Arizona for that, even though it's always a few degrees cooler in Tucson. That still means it's really hot. But Arizona should also be the solar state. We should be the clean energy capital of the world. We should be to clean energy jobs what Detroit is to cars and what Silicon Valley is to computers. And that's going to require real federal investment. And I think we've started to see that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We've started to see that with the CHIPS Act. Right now, 1/3 of all union carpenters in the state of Arizona are working on either the TSMC or the Intel big factory fabs installations that they're building there. So these are jobs, good jobs for people, real ladder of opportunity for people. And we need to bring that kind of approach to really helping address and helping to solve the climate crisis in a way that creates economic opportunity. 2, we need to talk about how do we make sure we have more money in people's pockets. As you heard about, I worked in the Clinton White House at a time that we balanced the budget, but we did so in a way that was fair to people and really about creating economic opportunity, creating the Children's Health Insurance Program, expanding college access, the largest amount that had been expanded since the GI Bill. You have in David Schweikert, who I'm running against, the person who is responsible for the most anti-fiscal responsibility step our country has ever taken, the Trump tax cuts, but also responsible for the largest tax increase on middle-class families in American history, the repeal of the expanded child tax credit that took so much money out of people's pockets over the past 2 or 3 years. And so we need to have a middle-class economic opportunity agenda that speaks to people and that reassures them that we understand where they're coming from and what they're facing day in and day out. We also have to be willing to speak truth to power. Look, as I said, I took on corporations, whether it was Elizabeth Warren or spending the past 10 years building an alternative to the big banks. A big part of what we're seeing go on right now in grocery stores and at the gas pump isn't just because of normal inflation, it's price gouging. We have seen at the gas pump record increases in prices. They've fluctuated somewhat, but at the same time, we have seen ExxonMobil, we've seen Saudi Aramco, the Saudi oil company, have record profits. In fact, Saudi Aramco had the largest profits of any company in the history of mankind. That's not because of inflation. That's because of people padding their pockets. And in David Schweikert, you have somebody who voted to stop the federal government from even being able to investigate whether there was price gouging. He didn't want to allow them, and he voted to actually prevent them from being able to even look into it, because of course he knew what the answer was, and we know who funds his campaigns and who he's actually working for. So we really need to be able to both say, yes, we need to take on the tax cuts, the tax unfairness for billionaires and big corporations, where people who are billionaires are literally paying less in taxes than teachers and firefighters and police officers. But we also have to have a positive agenda of how we're going to use those dollars to invest in America, invest in people's skills, invest in our schools, invest in opportunity and entrepreneurship and innovation that's going to drive our economy for the future.
Well, as you know, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I don't think it, though, gets a couple of things. One is it doesn't get at the fact that people think the Trump economy was really good. So just let me say a little bit of what I would suggest. Number one, I think there's a theory that can take what you're saying and get it down into a much smaller package. But secondly, people don't realize that the inflation started under Trump. It didn't start under Biden.
Yeah.
That's a really key point. Yeah. And concentration of industries has led to a lot of the inflation, more than half of it. It started under Trump because they're dependent upon business, so they don't enforce antitrust laws. Biden has, with the result that the inflation that started under Trump has been cut by 2/3 under Biden. So it's that kind of a message. Plus, there are other things too in terms of the theory that can get it down. Anyway, I just
I'll reach out. We'll set up a time, and I'll always learn so much when I'm talking to John, and so looking forward to that. I guess the thing I'll say is we need the Biden campaign to be communicating more of that, and my hope is at the debate a lot of that's communicated. What I'm seeing and knocking on the doors and talking to voters is it's hard to start going back in time for people and saying, well, this is really what it was like in 2019 and in 2020. I think for me, what I've been trying to do more is have a positive vision that meets people where they are right now and doesn't try to kind of litigate what happened. I think that's, again, going to be more up to the Biden campaign with the kinds of dollars and everything that they have to spend, and give people a sense, okay, here's where we go from here. Because I'm asking them to fire, I'm a little bit different than what Biden's doing. I'm asking them to fire the incumbent and to hire me to replace them. But it ties together.
Schweikert follows Trump's lead.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, let's
we'll talk.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so that what a nice give and take there, guys. Really appreciate it. So let's see, Pat Weedoff has a question.
I do. Thank you.
Hi, Pat.
So hi there. It's been a while, a long time.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I understand that you're the founder and CEO of a company that helps people and businesses fight climate change. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
Yeah. So I started in 2013 a company called Aspiration, and stepped down a couple years ago. Company's still going, though it's kind of split into different parts and so on after I left. But really the idea was to help people make their money matter. And by which I mean, number one, to give people bank accounts that were fair to them, as opposed to big banks where they're usually charging hundreds of dollars in annual fees for the average person. And in fact, even more than that for the 20% of people who are most vulnerable. We said we were not going to charge any fixed bank fees, no ATM fees, overdraft fees, late fees, service fees, monthly fees, none of that. But also make sure that people's dollars aren't being used the way that big banks are using their dollars. So made sure that their dollars aren't being used to fund oil and gas pipelines or drilling, made sure their money is not being used for any fossil fuel projects, not being used for gun manufacturers or private prisons or anything along those lines. And then as we grew, also helped people have a positive impact. So we allowed people to plant a tree with every purchase that they made. During the time I was there, planted over 100 million trees all over the world. So one of the largest private sector reforestation efforts anywhere. And, to help suck carbon out of the atmosphere and help fight climate change. And then, kept on expanding from there. And as I said, I stepped down as CEO in 2022, but really proud of what we did. And also the last thing I'd say is also proud of how we ran the company. Going back to a little bit of what John and I were talking about, part of what I need to do in this race is be able to go to talk to some of those independents and even Republicans who are, quote, air quote, pro-business, and say, look, if you're really pro-business, you need to care about your workers. You need to care about what happens to them. When I was CEO, I cut my own pay, and we made sure that every one of our employees had at least a $25 minimum wage, a living wage during COVID. And a lot of people said, oh, you're going to hurt your business. We ended up that year being one of Inc. magazine's 10 fastest growing companies in America. At the same time as we were one of Newsweek's most beloved workplaces. And so, I think that speaks to the kind of country we can live in as well, where we're investing in our people, investing in workers, putting more money in the pockets of middle-class folks. And that's how we grow our economy, from the middle out, as opposed to from the top down, and really speak to that kind of big choice that we have with David Schweikert's view of economics.
Did you have a question, Mike?
Yeah, I do. So Andrei, I got kind of a multi-part question for you, and it's kind of inside baseball, so I apologize in advance. But we did have a relatively recent election in 2022 where we lost the seat to Schweikert with a very good candidate by about 3,000 votes. So I'm interested to hear how you're reaching out to those voters that we got to get to your win number. What exactly what voters are we targeting in order to get to that win number? And what makes you the best candidate to reach out to those voters and get over the top?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think it's the gating question to all of this, right? Everything we talk about, you first got to win the election, and Jevin Hodge ran a really good campaign, but I think, as everybody would agree, he didn't have, number one, he didn't have the financial support he needed.
Yeah.
And not the lack of his efforts. This is really different. Again, as I said, we've outraised David Schweikert every single quarter. I'm the only challenger in America to have done that, who's running against the incumbent. So in all of the 435 races out there, I'm the only one who's outraised the incumbent every quarter, and done so by, again, not going to corporate PACs and not the self-funding, but by the enthusiasm of everyday people who are giving to our campaign and excited about it. So I think that, number one, the ability to have the resources to communicate the message, the ability to have that kind of enthusiasm is going to be important. Look, Schweikert won last time by 0.85% of the vote, about 3,000 votes, in a district where, as I said before, all of our statewide Democrats won on that same day by 4% or more. Mark Kelly won by 7%. Adrian Fontes won by 8%. That means there's 8-9% of the district that voted for a Mark Kelly or an Adrian Fontes or the others, and then turned around and voted for Schweikert. And we know it's not because they like Schweikert. This is a guy who is deeply, deeply unpopular. Just for some of you who don't know the details about him, voted to overturn the election on January 6th. Voted repeatedly to make a national ban on abortion, no exceptions, basically taking the Arizona 1860s law and making it national. Somebody who says climate change is folklore, somebody who wants to get rid of the FBI because they're too mean to Donald Trump. Somebody who voted against the PACT Act for veterans when you had people like Ted Cruz and Matt Gaetz voting yes. Somebody who voted against the CHIPS Act, which is such a big deal for this district, when you had Doug Ducey saying it's critical to Arizona's economic future. Here's a guy who is one of 5 people in all of American history to be unanimously censured by both parties because of his ethics violations. And so this is a guy who's deeply unpopular. But in order to win, we have to go to that 8-9% of voters and convince them that there's a Democratic alternative that they can get behind, because otherwise they're just going to default to the guy they don't like, David Schweikert. And that's going to be their natural predisposition. So I think my ability to talk about my time serving in the military, the same way that Mark Kelly has and Adrian Fontes has, my ability to talk about having been a prosecutor and taken on a lot of these issues when I was Assistant Attorney General under Terry Goddard, is going to be so important. And my ability to talk about my track record and qualifications. I think that voters are going to be looking for somebody who they say, okay, he's a Democrat. I may not agree with him on everything, but he has the qualifications and experience and credentials to actually do the job. And he'll go there and he'll know what he's doing. And that's going to be important. And so I think for all of those reasons, that is the universe of voters we're speaking to. And that is the message that we're bringing.
Great.
Okay, Barbara.
Joseph, Barbara has been communicating with me via DM, and she's unable to unmute, but her question: we're living in days of extreme precarity, as you suggested. Nuclear weapons are one of the greatest threats we face. What will you do to address the presence of nuclear weapons and set the doomsday clock back in time? 4 minutes before midnight.
It's a great question, and frankly a difficult one, because I talked about the Cold War and some of the differences. Then in that kind of world, arms control treaties made some sense, right? You had the ability to have inspections, and it really came down to 2 powers controlling it. We can't do an arms control treaty with ISIS. We can't do an arms control treaty with some of these, completely rogue nations out there. And so that's not to say I'm against, yes, we should still pursue arms control and along those lines. but it's going to have to be a different kind of approach if you're thinking about how to protect against nuclear issues. And it's going to have to be something where American diplomacy is going to be really, really key. Because in a, not to get too technical, but in a multipolar world, right, where you have all of these different powers there who aren't coalescing into two groups, but many, many powers, you have to be able to create an ethos that people agree upon, and that people are going to be willing to be policed on, without just having those two powers there breaking it down. And so I think that's going to be part of how we have to think about the world we live in, and a kind of foreign policy that also makes sure that we're not just leading with our military might, but with our moral might as well. Our greatest defense is people around the world looking to America with admiration and hope, and as a partner in their own dreams for their future and for their children's future. And that strong moral voice is in some ways going to be our best defense against these rising nations. Look, that's not going to stop terrorist cells, but it helps create the environment where we have a better chance of making sure that our military and our other tools of our disposal, things like foreign aid, USAID, and so on, are able to break through.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that real quick and get your reaction to this. I think one of the reasons why it's so important for us to rally democracies around the world to defend Ukraine is because it creates a terrible exemplar of why countries should seek nuclear weapons, because we have a very clear example. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons and is now facing annihilation at the hands of the Russians. Countries
Absolutely.
will notice that, and there will be extreme pressure if we do not defeat this attempt by Russia for countries that are vulnerable militarily to get nuclear weapons to deter such attacks. Could you talk about that a little bit?
No, that is a great point, and frankly, one that I don't hear made often enough, because that is a big part of why we have to win in Ukraine. Because Michael's exactly right. If all sorts of horrible outcomes if we were not to win, and if Russia were to win there, but part of it would be to send exactly the signal that he's talking about to all these countries, which is you better get your own nuclear weapons, because the United States of America and the West aren't going to be there for you.
Absolutely.
And so,
that's Paul Stapleton Smith has been very patient, Paul.
All right.
Andrei, we couldn't be more delighted for you to be with us today. And I want to thank you for all of the work. You know that from this group. We admire the work that you've done over all those previous years. Regarding the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, labor unions' single most important federal priority, as if we don't have enough priorities, all of us, right? So will you, or have you committed to protecting the right to organize? And could you please, as I was reviewing your website, and I know you're son of a Teamster, God bless.
Yeah.
What is your commitment to labor unions? So first, PRO Act, right?
Yes.
Single most important piece of labor legislation, your commitment to that, and then your view now of how you can commit to best support our union families.
Yeah.
Please.
No, that is a great question, and we don't have that up on our website. As we're adding things, we absolutely should. So I'll take that back, and appreciate that. Look, first of all, as Paul said, son of a teamster and a teacher, grew up in a labor household. That journey from that small apartment that Joseph was talking about was in many ways paved by the presence of strong labor unions that helped my family when we needed it. Also proud to have been a member myself of two labor unions, APSME and SEIU, and proud to have also worked for two labor unions. This is really important. The PRO Act is critical legislation. It is one of the areas where, going back to Kirsten Sinema, not to harp on it, but one of the areas where I think she really let us down by walking away from her commitments on that. Absolutely believe in the right to organize. And frankly, it goes back to a little bit of the conversation that John and I were having about the vision of the economy, because my vision of the economy is about how do we have a strong middle class? How do we put money into people's pockets so that they can then go out and spend money and build a good life for themselves and their family, because that's how you actually grow the economy, not by giving more and more to billionaires and so they can go out and buy racehorses or artwork or whatever else it is that they do. And that starts with having strong unions. And it starts with understanding unions not as something off separate as a constituency, but something that is central to the vision of the kind of economy we want to build.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up the economy again.
Yeah.
I have some dialogue for you.
All right.
So we've been talking for months now, if not over a year, that the Biden administration really needs to message better. And so some of the things you and John were talking about were great for folks, who understand the economy and also understand the difference between macro and micro. But the great majority of voters that are having problems with us right now are just real concerned. They're paying way much more for groceries than they were just, 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you worked with President Clinton, and I thought whoever the genius was, in fact, I think it was James Carville, right? So what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
It's the economy, stupid, and then the second thing is Clinton had a way of touching people with the feeling that he really cared about what, their burden was. I think Biden has some ability to do that, and I think he has. I think anytime he honestly talks about Bo, I think he connects with the great majority of Americans. Yeah. But I would love to see somebody on the either his press room or Council of Economic Advisors, and I almost have like a Robert Reich, who can really get the word out. Yeah. The other thing, and this I haven't said this to anybody, previous guests. So, who was the last president that's had some real messaging issues with the economy as much as Biden has? Richard Nixon. What did Richard Nixon do? It was very controversial. Wage and price controls.
Right. Yeah.
So I have dropped the mic.
All right. Yeah, look, you're absolutely right about, there's a lot there. Absolutely right about Bill Clinton. I think what really worked with Bill Clinton is that he not only conveyed the sense that I feel your pain, as the saying went, but I think people also understood that he was going to do something about it, and that he really had a plan that spoke to them. And I think that we as Democrats need to be better at that. You mentioned Democracy Journal, which I started actually almost 20 years ago, and John has written I believe for Democracy Journal in the past. And I started it, and I remember when I had the germ of the idea was in the 2004 campaign, John Kerry versus George W. Bush. And I remember watching the presidential debate. I think it was the third presidential debate. It was one here in Tempe. And Bob Schieffer was the moderator, and he asked, what would you say to an unemployed steelworker who's losing his job? And he has both the candidates. And, George W. Bush said, well, we're going to retrain you for some other kind of job, which great in theory, but hard for, somebody who's been at steelworking for 40 years or whatever else. And then John Kerry's answer, and I was part of his policy team, so I his answer was, well, we're going to have a we're going to get rid of the tax credit that encourages outsourcing, which is right. We should do that. But I think for most people out there, I have the sense of, yeah, does anybody really believe that that's really going to solve that steelworkers problem? And unless we really have an answer for people on the economy, unless we really have what Bill Clinton did have, which is a vision about where our economy is going and what we're going to do to get there, and here are the steps that we're taking, that it's going to fall flat. And I think it did. And look, here we are 20 years later, still grappling with some of that. I believe in this vision of a middle out economics, of really contrasting top down, trickle down economics, because whatever you say about it, it's an explanation. Now, it's a wrong explanation, doesn't actually work. But you ask a Republican, okay, how are you going to build your economy? Well, we're going to do what Donald Trump is promising or threatening to do right now, which is we're going to give another big tax cut to corporations and rich people, and they're going to go create jobs. Yeah. And so at least they have an explanation. For me, I believe the middle out economics is that explanation. No, that's not who creates jobs. It is, you're going to give money to wealthy people. They're not going to go out and start another company. They're not going to do that. You know who creates jobs? It's the person who is able to go to Target or Walmart or the grocery store and be able to buy things. And that's how you create jobs. It's the person who's able to, have the ability to have childcare so that they can go work and be part of the economy. That's how you're going to create economic growth. So it's a real different theory, and I think that economic vision is what Bill Clinton had, and I think we as Democrats need to be really pushing that a lot more. We sometimes get lost in a blizzard of policy proposals, all of which are great, without again, I'm speaking from the John Schwartz hymnal here, without the things that are really tying them together in a larger vision.
Yeah, 100%.
Demand. Thank you, Andrei.
You're absolutely right, Andrei. We have one last question. Can I have it, Joe? Sure,
go for it.
I promised Donna I'd ask this question, and it is one of my favorite questions, and I find it very revelatory about people's interest. And you'll be spending about 90% of your time in committees. And so, she wants to know, and I would like to know too, what committees you'd be most interested in serving on if you were able to, make your pitch to your colleagues to put you on a particular committee.
Yeah, good question.
So, I think the number one would be energy and natural resources. I really think we have an opportunity to help transform the Arizona economy and be a big part of the solution around climate issues while creating jobs and rising economic growth. And going back to what I talked about before, here's how we as Democrats talk about how we build the economy and how we build the future. And so, making Arizona the solar state is one of the things I believe in very deeply, and something I want to focus on.
Well, okay. Then one last comment for you then, Andrei. Go campaign. If you get this nomination, go campaign with our ACC candidates. They need help.
Absolutely. Was with them yesterday.
Awesome.
And all those folks. They're doing great. Lauren Kuby, who ran last time around, and was a great candidate, is a big supporter of our campaign. So we're working with the climate folks, and I'll just make a pitch to all of you. What you're doing is so important. This district is truly the most important district, I think, in all of America, because of the overlap of not just the impact on the House, but the impact on the U.S. Senate and on the White House and on our state legislature, LD2 and LD4 in this district. So would love all of you to get involved, whether it's making a campaign contribution, whether it's signing up to do some phone banking, whatever it is you can do. We really need your help. And again, thank you all for taking the time today.
Great. Mike, you have anything else, or?
No, I'm good. And Andrei's got a hard out at 1, so we got to let him go.
Yeah. Oh, hey.
Thanks,
okay.
all. Good to see you.
Andrei, thank you so much. Great program. We all enjoyed it. And if you can squeeze some more time in down the road, come on back.
Let's do it.
If you win that primary, we expect you back here, buddy.
That was inferred, Mike. See, I can't make an endorsement before the primary.
Understood. All right. Thanks.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.